Deep in the heart of the woods, hidden behind a sleepy village, lay a secret kingdom, a realm of fairies. These tiny, fluttering beings lived in homes crafted from nature's gifts. Hollowed tree trunks, woven leaves, and cozy burrows borrowed from moles. The earth cherished them, and in return they tended to the woods. Healing trees, nurturing soil, and weaving magic into every root and petal. Mother Nature herself shielded them from human eyes. Villagers whispered of fairies, but the trees stood guard. Branches would tickle intruders' necks, paths would twist into confusion, and roots would rise to block the way. Yet once in a great while, the woods would part for a chosen guest, the girl who loved autumn. On a misty autumn afternoon, when the sun played hide-and-seek behind silver clouds, a girl named Evie wandered into the woods. She adored this time of year, the crisp air, the golden leaves, the way the earth smelled like cinnamon and damp earth. As she walked, she barely noticed the path beneath her feet. Too enchanted by the fiery canopy above. But something strange happened. The trees, sensing her gentle heart, did not stir to stop her. No branches reached to block her way, no roots tripped her steps. Unknowingly, Evie stepped beyond the boundary where no human was meant to go. When she finally looked down, the world had changed. The familiar dirt path had vanished, replaced by a cobblestone walkway lined with red maples. The air hummed with something alive. Evie turned, but the way back was gone. Only the strange path remained, glowing faintly in the dappled light. A whisper in the wind urged her forward. The cobblestone path. Evie hesitated, her boots tapping against the smooth, moss-edged stones. The cobblestones shimmered faintly, as if dusted with crushed pearls. The trees here stood taller, their trunks etched with symbols that pulsed like slow, sleeping hearts. A rustling sound made her freeze. Tiny footsteps, too light to be an animal's, skittered nearby. Then, from behind a cluster of amber leaves, a small figure darted into view. It was no taller than her hand, with wings like spun sapphire and a tunic woven from dandelion fluff. The creature stared up at her, eyes wide with equal parts curiosity and alarm. Evie gasped, "A fairy?" Before she could speak, the little being zipped forward, circling her head in a blur of blue. Then, with a giggle like wind chimes, it darted down the path, as if daring her to follow. The whispering trees. Evie took a step forward, then froze as the maple leaves above her began to tremble. Not from wind, but from words. A chorus of soft voices rustled through the branches. "She's here, the one who listens." Her breath caught. The trees were speaking. The fairy ahead paused mid-flight, wings buzzing impatiently. With a tiny huff, it zipped back and tugged at Evie's sleeve. Its touch lighter than a cobweb. "Come on," it seemed to say. Heart pounding, Evie followed. The path sloped downward, and suddenly, the woods opened into a glade. Hundreds of fireflies hung in the air like suspended stars. Beneath them, fairies flitted between mushroom houses and acorn lanterns, their laughter ringing like dropped pennies. At the center stood an ancient oak, its bark carved with glowing runes. A hush fell as every tiny face turned toward Evie. Then chaos. Fairies shrieked and dove for cover. One tripped over a pebble, another hid behind a buttercup. Only the blue-winged fairy remained, hovering protectively in front of Evie, as if to say, "This one's with me." The fairy queens welcome. Before Evie could react, the air shimmered like heat rising from summer pavement. A glow emerged from the ancient oak, soft at first, then bright as morning light. The fairies gasped in unison, bowing their tiny heads as a radiant figure floated down from the gnarled branches. She was taller than the others, nearly the length of Evie's forearm, with wings like stained glass and a gown woven from living vines. A crown of twisted willow rested atop her fiery red hair. The fairy queen, Evie, instinctively curtsied, her face flushing. The queen's laughter tinkled like water over stones. "No need for formality, child," she said, her voice both young and ancient. "The trees do not whisper for just anyone. You have been expected." Evie's mouth went dry. "Expected?" The queen gestured, and a teacup no larger than a thimble floated into Evie's palm. The liquid inside smelled of honey and thunderstorms. "Drink," urged the queen. "Then you'll understand." Around them, the fairies leaned in, holding their breath, the taste of magic. Evie hesitated, staring into the tiny cup. The liquid shimmered like liquid gold, swirling with tiny sparks that danced like fireflies. She could feel the eyes of every fairy upon her, their tiny wings fluttering with anticipation. Taking a deep breath, she raised the cup to her lips. The world dissolved. Suddenly, she wasn't standing in the glade anymore. She was everywhere at once. She saw the forest as the trees saw it, roots drinking deep from hidden rivers, leaves breathing in sunlight. She felt the fairies' magic threading through every blade of grass, every fallen acorn, and she understood. This place was alive. Not just the fairies, but the earth itself, a great whispering being that had watched her for years as she wandered its edges. Then just as suddenly, she was back in the glade, gasping. The teacup was empty. The fairy queen smiled. "Now you see," she murmured. "You've always been part of the story." Evie's hands trembled. "But why me?" Before the queen could answer, a shrill alarm rang through the glade, a sound like cracking ice. The fairies shrieked, scattering in panic. Something was wrong. The shadow in the glade. The peaceful glade erupted into chaos. Fairies darted in every direction, their tiny voices rising in alarm. The golden light that had filled the clearing dimmed, as if a cloud had passed over the sun, but the sky was still clear. Then Evie saw it. A creeping darkness slithered between the trees, swallowing the light where it touched. The grass beneath it withered, turning grey and brittle. The air grew heavy with the scent of rotting leaves and damp stone. The fairy queen's wings snapped open, glowing like embers. "The hollowing," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "It's found us." Evie's skin prickled. "What is that?" Before the queen could answer, the shadow lunged. a tendril of black mist shooting toward them like a striking snake. The queen raised her hands, and a shield of golden light flared to life, deflecting the attack. But the barrier flickered weakly. "Run!" cried a tiny fairy, tugging at Evie's sleeve. "It feeds on human doubt. You mustn't let it touch you." Evie's heart hammered. Doubt. She thought of all the times she dismissed magic as childish fantasy, and the shadow pulsed, growing thicker. It was feeding on her. The light within. The shadow coiled around the glade, its inky tendrils probing the edges of the fairy queen's flickering shield. Evie could feel it pressing against her mind, whispering in a voice like rustling dead leaves. "There is no magic. This is all a dream." Her chest tightened. The words slithered into her thoughts, unraveling her wonder like a pulled thread. Around her, the fairy's glow dimmed, the queen's golden light sputtered. Then Evie clenched her fists. No. The memory of the enchanted tea surged through her, the certainty of roots drinking deep, of leaves singing in the wind. This world was real. She knew it deeper than doubt. A warmth kindled in her chest, not the queen's magic, but her own. The shadow recoiled as Evie's hands began to glow. Not gold, but the fierce orange of autumn leaves catching fire. The hollowing shrieked, its form rippling like water struck by a stone. The fairy queen's eyes widened. "You carry the spark," she breathed. "The woods chose well." But the shadow wasn't defeated. It gathered itself, hissing, and the oldest maple tree at the glade's edge groaned, the ancient maple's secret. The great maple tree shuddered, its amber leaves raining down like embers. With a sound like splitting stone, its bark cracked open, revealing a hollow pulsing with soft green-gold light. From within the tree, a voice echoed, deep and earthy. "Remember?" Suddenly, images flooded Evie's mind. A younger version of herself, barely 6 years old, chasing a butterfly into these very woods. The same maple tree, its branches lowering to cradle her when she tripped. A tiny blue fairy, the very one who'd led her here today, pressing a leaf to her skinned knee, the pain vanishing like mist. She had been here before. The magic had simply made her forget. The hollowing let out a wail, its form fraying at the edges. "Lies!" it screeched. "Humans abandon wonder. They always do." But Evie stepped forward, her glow brightening. "Not me." She reached toward the ancient maple, and the tree gave her something. A seed. Not just any seed, but one that shimmered like captured starlight. The second her fingers closed around it, the hollowing recoiled, hissing like steam. The fairy queen inhaled sharply. "The heart seed," she whispered. "It hasn't bloomed in 1,000 years. The heart seed's choice." The heart seed pulsed in Evie's palm, warm and alive, its light beating in time with her own heart. The hollowing writhed at the edges of the glade, its darkness churning like a storm, but it dared not come closer. "Quickly," urged the fairy queen, her voice trembling with urgency. "Plant the seed. Only then can the hollowing be banished." Evie dropped to her knees, her fingers digging into the soft earth at the base of the ancient maple. But as she moved to place the seed, a terrible thought struck her. What if this changes everything? The seed wasn't just a weapon, it was a beginning. The old tales whispered that heart seeds tied human lives to the fairy realm. Planting it would mean leaving her world behind, stepping fully into this one. The hollowing sensed her hesitation. "You see," it sneered, inching forward. "You don't belong here. You'll wilt here, like all mortal things." Evie's breath hitched. She thought of her mother waiting at home, of her school books and her sunlit bedroom window. Then she looked up at the fairy queen, whose wings drooped with exhaustion, at the tiny blue fairy who'd once healed her knee, at the maple tree that had remembered her when she hadn't remembered herself. Her fingers tightened around the seed. "I choose both," she whispered, and with a deep breath, she pressed the heart seed into the earth, the blossoming of two worlds. As the heart seed touched the earth, a shockwave of light erupted from the ground. Ripples of gold and amber spread outward, racing through roots and branches like lightning. The hollowing screamed as the light struck it, not destroying it, but changing it. The inky darkness splintered into 1,000 shimmering threads, dissolving into the soil like rain after a drought. Evie gasped as warmth flooded her body. Vines curled gently around her wrists, not to bind her, but to connect. Above her, the ancient maple burst into bloom, its branches heavy with luminous leaves that cast dancing reflections across the glade. Then she heard it. A heartbeat, not her own, but the forest's. A slow, steady pulse beneath her palms. The fairy queen knelt beside her, tears like dewdrops on her cheeks. "You didn't just save us," she murmured. "You woke the woods anew." But before Evie could respond, the ground trembled, not violently, but joyfully. From the spot where the heartseed had been planted, a slender sapling shot upward, its leaves unfurling like tiny hands reaching for the sun, and nestled among its branches something impossible, a door. Not a fairy-sized door, but one just right for Evie, carved from maple wood, its handle shaped like a twisting vine. The blue fairy darted forward, giggling. "Well, open it." The door between worlds. Evie reached for the vine-carved handle, her fingers brushing against wood that felt strangely warm. As the door creaked open, a gust of wind rushed past her, carrying the scent of cinnamon, fallen leaves, and something unmistakably home. Through the doorway, she didn't see the glade or the fairy village. Instead, she saw her own bedroom, bathed in twilight, her half-finished homework still scattered across the desk. The pumpkin candle on her windowsill flickered, its glow mirroring the pulse of the heartseed sapling behind her. "A bridge," breathed the fairy queen, "one that only you can cross." The blue fairy zipped around Evie's head. "Now you can visit whenever you want. No more getting lost, just knock 3 times. On any tree with amber leaves, and the path will find you." Eve's heart swelled. She could keep both worlds, her mother's laugh, and the taste of fairy tea, school mornings, and starlit dances in the glade. But as she stepped toward the door, the maple sapling shivered. A single leaf detached, drifting into her palm. Etched into its surface was a symbol, a circle woven through with roots and wings. "A promise," said the queen softly. "The woods will remember you, so long as you remember them." Evie tucked the leaf into her pocket like a secret and crossed the threshold. The door clicked shut behind her. In her room, the candle's flame steadied. Outside her window, the old neighborhood maple rustled its branches as if waving, and in her palm, the leaf symbol glowed once, gently, before fading into ordinary veins. But Evie knew, somewhere beyond the twilight, a cobblestone path waited. The first return. The next morning, Evie woke with the maple leaf still tucked in her pajama pocket. She half expected it to have vanished overnight, proof that her adventure had been nothing more than a dream. But as she pulled it out, the edges shimmered faintly in the morning light, and the symbol pulsed once, warm against her fingertips. Downstairs, her mother hummed over a pan of sizzling pancakes. "You slept like a log last night," she remarked, flipping a golden brown circle onto Evie's plate. "Big walk yesterday must have worn you out." Evie smiled into her orange juice. If only you knew. After breakfast, she slipped outside, the leaf clutched tight in her hand. The old neighborhood maple stood at the edge of their yard, its branches heavy with autumn fire. Heart pounding, she pressed her palm to the bark. Knock, knock, knock. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a breeze stirred, carrying the faintest whisper of fairy laughter. The tree's roots shifted, just slightly, and there it was, the cobblestone path unfurling like a ribbon between the blades of grass. Evie stepped forward. "Evie, honey?" Her mother's voice from the porch. The path flickered. "Just checking the mail," Evie called back, glancing regretfully at the vanishing stones. But the leaf in her hand glowed reassuringly. There would be time. That night, she pinned the leaf above her bed, where it caught the moonlight like a tiny lantern. And in the woods, the fairies toasted her with acorn cups, their cheers ringing through the trees. The secret keeper. Weeks passed, and Evie settled into a delicate rhythm, school by day, whispered adventures by twilight. She learned to time her visits carefully, when her mother was distracted by her gardening, or when the autumn rains kept everyone indoors. The fairies taught her their ways, how to brew tea from dewdrops, best sipped at sunrise, how to understand the tree's murmurs, lean close and hum low in your throat, and most importantly, how to guard the secret. Not all humans would respect our world, warned the Fairy Queen one evening as Evie helped polish the acorn lanterns. Some would tear it apart for a handful of magic. Evie thought of the hollowing, how it had thrived on doubt and greed. "I won't tell a soul," she promised, "but secrets have weight." One afternoon, her best friend Liam cornered her after school. "You've been weird lately," he said, kicking a pebble. "Always vanishing. And yesterday, I swear I saw you talking to a tree." Evie's stomach dropped. Before she could reply, Liam's eyes widened. He reached into her open backpack, where the maple leaf, normally hidden in her pencil case, had slipped loose. It glowed faintly in his palm. "Whoa," he breathed. "What?" "This." The final choice, grand finale. Liam turned the glowing leaf over in his hands, his expression shifting from shock to wonder. The maple symbol pulsed softly, casting amber light across his face. Evie held her breath. She could snatch it back, make up a story. Glow-in-the-dark sticker, science experiment, weird fungus. But the words stuck in her throat. Then Liam did something unexpected. He grinned. "This is why you've been sneaking off, isn't it?" He thrust the leaf toward her, not with greed, but with excitement. "You found something real." Relief flooded Evie's chest. She hadn't realized how heavy the secret had been until she let it go. "It's better than real," she whispered. "But you can't tell anyone." Liam mimed, zipping his lips. "Scout's honor." That evening, Evie led him to the neighborhood maple. With a shared glance, they knocked 3 times. The cobblestone path appeared, wider now, as if welcoming 2 instead of 1. In the glade, the fairy queen awaited them, not with fear, but with a knowing smile. "Ah," she said, "the woods chose twice today." As Liam gaped at the fairy village, Evie knelt by the heartseed sapling. It had grown taller, its branches now cradling 2 doors. One carved with vines, hers, the other with swirling constellations, his. The queen placed a hand on Evie's shoulder. "Secrets grow lighter when shared wisely," she murmured. "You've done well, guardian." Years later, when autumn winds blew and the maple leaves turned fire bright, the village children would whisper about the 2 odd teens who always wandered into the woods at twilight. "They're looking for fairies," the littlest ones would say. And high in the branches, the blue fairy would giggle, tossing down a single glowing leaf, just to keep the magic alive. The end. Did Evie's adventure make you believe in magic? Hit like if you'd follow that cobblestone path. Subscribe to Drift into Dreaming for more enchanted tales. And tell me in the comments what's hiding in your woods. Turn on notifications. Next week's story glows even brighter.